Mental health workers of Reddit, what's the most fucked up thing you have seen? I worked in a psychiatric medical institute for children. One girl, 13, had been pimped out by her mother and abused by several men. One night at bedtime routines, she hadn't come out of the shower yet and had locked herself in. When she finally opened the door, she had bit into her hand, and her veins and tendons were showing. She kept moving her hand to watch them move. Craziest thing was that once she was transported to the hospital, her mother made jokes about how her daughter just wanted to see what it tasted like. This girl basically turned into a celebrity around the campus because all the other children thought she was edgy for what she had done. A patient on our ward, with chronic schizophrenia and delusions of persecution, having already blinded himself in one eye and amputated a finger in the past, managed to get some craft scissors and castrate himself while under our care, and flushed his testicles down the toilet. He came out of his room into the hall with a bloody V down his hospital pant legs, a bit shaken looking, but otherwise calm. Edit. Spelling edit 2. Just remembered another one. A 30-something guy, again with these religious-based delusions, became convinced that God wanted him to cut off his arm, so he built an elaborate guillotine in the woods near his town, and had the whole thing arranged where he chopped his own arm off, put a belt tourniquet on it, walked to town, and had someone call 911. He was brought to our hospital and medically stabilized, then transferred to our psych unit. When first admitted, he was clearly hallucinating the voice of God. He was completely unperturbed at the fact he did not have his right arm any longer. He was right-handed. After about a month of treatment, his psychosis diminished, and it was really sad to see the beginnings of regret forming for him. Whoa, telling this one, a lot of other really fucked up stories are rushing back to me. I no longer work in inpatient mental health. I'm on the outpatient side now. I don't miss the intense horror and sadness at all. By far, the most heartbreaking things for me usually involved repetitive movements and the person being nonverbal. Let me explain. I was helping cover night shift for a residential treatment center. As I'm doing room checks, I hear this repetitive banging sound coming from the room at the farthest end of the hall. Go down there as quickly as I can, and see the girl laying face down, raising her upper body up off of the pillow and slamming back down on the bed over and over and over again, all while she was asleep. When I grabbed another staff, they just kind of shrugged and said, yeah, she does that like every night. It's sad, isn't it? Turns out it's a thing called RMD, and can sometimes happen in kids for a variety of reasons, but hers was definitely mental health and trauma related. Also, had another teenage girl get brought in right after a guy had picked her up, gotten her high on bath salts, and sexually assaulted her. I saw her sitting in a chair, completely nonverbal with an absolute blank expression on her face, bruises and cuts on her neck and legs, just rocking back and forth and twisting and pulling her hair to the point it was all just a giant knot. I can handle screaming, sobbing, fighting, all of that. But when you see someone who is completely non-responsive just doing the same movements over and over again, you feel completely at a loss. Let's see. Well, there was a time I was in an adolescent psych ward. Very happy and stable now, over a decade later, for 2 weeks. And I was depressed and remorseful about a recent suicide attempt, but was otherwise fine. I got roomed with this Russian kid who spoke no English. He was catatonic during the day, and I wasn't in my room unless I had to be because the guy creeped me out. Dead eyes, disgustingly long nails, smelled bad. He was totally unable to care for himself. We were both maybe 14-15. Several times, I woke up in the middle of the night to him standing over my bed, staring at me. Once I woke up to him sprinkling water everywhere in the room, chanting something and using a Bible and the water to bless things. There was a big window between the heads of our beds, and he repeatedly blessed that window by saying something in, what I assume was, Russian in a deep, demonic voice, and then sprinkling water from a bowl he somehow procured. He sounded legitimately possessed. He did this for at least an hour, before eventually starting to sprinkle the water Catholic priest style on me, my bed, etc. And then I noticed the smell of urea. That was pee, not water. Highly dehydrated pee. I waited until he stopped this robotic sprinkling and demonic chanting, and then got up as if I was going to go to the bathroom, but then ran out and called a nurse. There was yellow-orange splatter all over my sheets, and somehow that shit wasn't as terrifying as the sleep paralysis night terror combo I used to get, but it was wild and gross. Not a worker, but when my sister was checked into a psych ward after a suicide attempt, I went and visited her and got to meet some interesting people. My sister had made some friends there, and one of her friends had hallucinations, auditory and visual. This boy was no older than 16, and his explanation of what he saw was fucking horrifying. Basically, he was always surrounded by ninjas who raped him and were always watching him. Now at first it sounds kind of bizarre and maybe even funny, but really think about it. Vanta Black, hooded figures were always somewhere in the room watching him. The only visible thing on their bodies were the eyes. He said the ninjas would rape and torture him at random, and if they weren't doing that they'd be in the corners of the room telling him to kill himself. This boy was always looking around, giving blank stares to random places in the room. The most fucked up thing is that you'd see him start to tear up and shake, and you just felt so helpless. I hope he finds peace one day, and I think about him a lot. I work in the forensic side of mental health. Where do I begin? PT was drunk and was physically assaulted by her boyfriend. Upon arriving at the hospital is hysterical and tells nurse she was sexually assaulted in the back of the ambulance. Medic denies it. During the investigation both are asked to take lie detector tests. He passes. She fails and tries to commit suicide, saying the police have been horrible to her and accused her of lying for attention. She now has brain damage. DNA results come back. She was telling the truth. Woman claims her co-workers at a fast food restaurant are controlling her mind with their iPods. They aren't really co-workers. They are secret military police. They make her black out and gang rape her. She gets pregnant and gives birth under their control, and they take the baby and start raping her too. Every night she can hear her daughter begging for help but cannot get to her. She starts calling 911 saying her daughter is being raped and ends up making dozens of calls before she is arrested for misusing 911. She never had a daughter. She refused to believe this and kept screaming at us to go find the bloody sheets in her closet as proof. There were no sheets. I've never seen a human being as scared as she was before that day, but none of it was real. Young guy in his early 20s. Found guilty of raping several children from infancy to 10 years old. Admitted that he started molesting kids when he was a teenager. Admitted to bestiality. He purposely chose infants or disabled kids because they couldn't tell on him. He had journals where he talked about his crimes and drew cartoons of his assaults. He also wrote about his future plans for assaulting more children and invented torture devices he wanted to build. He had plans and diagrams where he was planning on surgically removing his own penis. This guy was a Hannibal Lecter in the making. After he was found guilty and committed, he started torturing himself. He would try to think of painful sexual things to do to himself, and if he found out he was not the first person to think of that particular way to inflict harm, he would rage out. He was obsessed with finding new ways to hurt people in a sexual way. He violated himself multiple times with a plunger while dunking his head in the toilet. Poop. So much poop. Especially in the hair. The smell lingers for days. I've seen and smelled some shit in my day. One of my patients is suffering from delusional disorder. On a normal basis, she's a very smart, beautiful girl who used to study medicine and is very much sane. But whenever she falls in love or gets attracted to a guy, she becomes another level of delusional to the point of being a stalker. Not the most fucked up, but just a random thought. She ain't crazy or anything though when you converse with her. Just amazes me how human behavior and mind work. Not a MH worker, but I was working in a jail few years back. As company we had this unit called observation cell where people were placed for their health, mental health and security reasons. I was working in that unit for a couple of night shifts with a guy who was having mental health issue, suicidal self-harming. The previous day he cut his right hand wrist by putting it in the opening of the food slot. The food slot is always closed and we opened it when the food is being served or the inmate gets his medication. The previous day when the food was being served to this inmate, he put his wrist between little opening door of food slot and pull his hand so the edge of that little door scratches his wrist and there was 2 or 3 inch long cut on his wrist. He got sticks for that. The next day when I was working with him on my night shift, at around 1 AM he jumped out of his bed and started screaming. Oops, I forgot to mention this unit has 2-way glass wall to do constant observation on this guy. so I was able to see him jumping out of his bed and screaming. Then he saw me looking at him, he turned towards me and started punching the glass wall with anger. I was telling him calm down and got to bed. Suddenly he stopped and started staring at me and gave a smile. I was like, he was about to do something scary. Yes, he did. He pulled the dressing out from his right hand wrist. By this time I turned the lights on high. We had a switch for light to adjust brightness, and in this unit the light stays on. We adjusted the brightness as per time of the day. Next thing he did was, he started pulling out the stitches. After he made the wound open, he gave me a smile, then he proceeded with biting the wound. I clearly saw he had a chunk of his skin in his mouth. I called code blue over the radio. It's a med emergency code. By the time nurses and other COs arrived, this guy proceeded with second bite, and this time he got out a layer of his skin and mouth and he pulled the skin like a gift wrap. We teared one with excitement. I can see 4-5 inch skin hanging and blood was dripping like anything. He was taken to hospital and given high dose of his medication to calm him down. Voila. Next night I was with this dude again. He came to glass wall and said he recognized me from last night. I told him, me too. He laughed and went to his bed. So at the same freaking time, 1 AM, like previous night, he woke up screaming and came to glass wall and started saying something in an alien language. I was thinking he will do the same thing, but no. He started walking in circles, then he stopped and again started saying something in the alien language. It appeared like he was mad for something that happened during the day, as I can hear some English in between. Sorry, I forgot to mention the water supply was shut off for this cell because he tried to flood the toilet in the morning, so during the day he might have used toilet for 3-4 times and did not flush, as I was able to see little mountain of his pop with toilet papers on it like icing on a chocolate cake. The mountain was like about to explode like an active volcano. So this dude again came to the glass window and started smiling, like he decided to do something. Then he went to the toilet sink, put both hands in the sink, grabbed the chocolate cake and threw that chunk on the main door. He pulled out all his poop from the sink and threw it at every corner. He came to the glass wall and started spreading his poop with his both hand. It took less than a minute for this act, but the unit was closed for a day for biohazards and cleaning. Apparently this dude was having hep C, so the cell was properly sanitized and was available for other inmates after a week. But the smell of the poop remained in every corner of the unit. Even the chairs in our office was having that smell for months. Scary thing was the moment when he was pulling his skin. When I recall that moment, I always relate it with a ripe mango skin we pull with the help or knife or with our mouth. Thank you for the love, you dirty Calabasas kids. Comment down below what video I should do next. Until next time, the Calabasas Bitx is out.